It's crossover Thursday and Thursday night football as we do this show on a game day. Locked on Chargers, locked on Broncos. And we're going to see if it's going to be the Broncos who stay hot or the Chargers getting back on track.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into this crossover Thursday. Locked on Chargers, locked on Broncos, a giant AFC West clash tonight. But thank you all for making us your first listen. To make sure you never miss the shows, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers and Locked On Broncos YouTube channels, and also listen wherever you get your podcast from. We appreciate the everydayers out there. And Sayre, I don't know at the beginning of this season if we would have thought that this game would have the stakes that it currently has, because we're talking about two teams who are both in the playoffs solidly right now, and a game that could end up making the difference on where these teams are seated.
It really could, and it's obviously, like you said, unexpected. I think even the NFL, indicated that this was unexpected. I mean, this is the first ever game flexed from Sunday to Thursday, if memory serves me right. So yeah. Pretty high praise for the way both of these teams have played. Obviously, the Broncos now in year 2 of the Sean Payton era, and we got year 1 of Jim Harbaugh over there with the LA Chargers. And I think the turnaround from both of these teams is obvious. I mean, obviously, it's way different. Just the vibe for each team, the culture for each team, the way that each of these teams kind of feels legitimate again. And obviously the stakes are high at this time of year, which is great to see, because we're no longer just wondering, okay, who could we root for to knock off the Chiefs in the next couple of weeks here? We actually have something to look forward to here.
Yeah, and I mean, potentially even two teams gaining on the Chiefs a little bit in the AFC West, as they seem to be fading somehow with only one win, and two teams who probably feel like, hey, if we get another shot at the Chiefs, we might be able to take them out in the playoffs. But it is crossover Thursday, and it's presented by PrizePicks. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Here we are, right? Lots of big storylines going on both sides. A huge pivotal clash between the Broncos and the Chargers on Thursday Night Football, and two teams who have been kind of going in different directions. Broncos on a 4-game winning streak, Chargers having lost back-to-back games. But when you're looking at this offense, who's been helped out a lot by their defense, frankly, over the last couple of days, what is your biggest storyline going into this one?
Well, it's got to be whether or not Bo Nix can cut the turnovers out again. And he did that for a long stretch of time. Only had 2 interceptions for about an 8 or 9 week period there in the middle of the season, was taking really good care of the football. And then all of a sudden against the Cleveland Browns, throws a couple of picks, couple of plays that you're kind of like, okay, maybe a 50-50 chance or less that happens normally. But then against the Indianapolis Colts, throws another 3 picks and a lot of just all bad throws, quite frankly. And it was tough to see, because you kind of get into this mindset watching the game, like whenever he drops back, like, is he going to be throwing an interception here? Because that's kind of what it feels like. And then he even said that after the game. He's like, the mental hurdle of getting over the interceptions is like, I feel like every time I'm dropping back, like, is this going to get picked off? Am I going to be late? Things like that. So just getting through that mental hurdle, but we've seen him do that before. He threw 4 picks in the first 2 games of the season, then really settled in after that. So we're hoping, obviously, against a very good Chargers defense, that he can cut those turnovers back. And that will be one of the key storylines, because, of course, the defense not always going to be able to bail you out with 5 turnovers in every game.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, 8 takeaways for that Broncos defense over the last couple of weeks. But I do think that you're kind of dealing with some rookie mistakes and things that come along with having a rookie that you would expect early on in the season, right? Or just you would expect in any rookie season, I should say. At the same time, it's like you're still winning even with those mistakes. And I think that's probably super valuable for the Broncos, and him specifically is just being like, well, you haven't had to actually pay the ultimate price. You haven't been the reason that you've lost a game. And for the Chargers, obviously, it's bring out Bad Bo, right? Are you going to play him the way you did the first 3 quarters of that first matchup? Or is it going to be like that fourth quarter where you kind of stormed back, they got 16 points, and made that game closer than it ever should have been? But looking at it from afar, though, especially with Justin Herbert, and wondering if the Chargers have ever kind of put the right offensive coaching staff around him to get the most out of him, as fans now are rioting a little bit about Greg Roman and the lack of success and consistency they've had offensively. I think you still have to be pretty happy with how this has worked out with Sean Payton and the Sean Payton Bo Nix pairing, because for a while it kind of looked like it was going to be a Justin Herbert Sean Payton pairing.
That was we were wondering about that for a
Yeah,
long period of time there. Obviously, the Chargers keeping Brandon Staley turned out to be fortuitous for the Broncos organization, and
probably
uh,
both of them, right? The Chargers end
probably
up with
both.
Jim Harbaugh, and then the
I
Broncos. I
think
mean, it looks like
so.
it's worked out for both, at least so far.
It absolutely, because a lot of Broncos fans would be lying if they said, no, we didn't really want Jim Harbaugh. I mean, the ownership group was at the dude's house in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I mean, everybody was on board for Harbaugh if he was willing to come out of the
Weird.
NFL a year ago as opposed to when he did. But I think that with the Sean Payton pairing with Bo Nix, it's been great because you have a head coach who is just fully behind the quarterback and figuring out, okay, like after the game against Indianapolis, Sean Payton was thinking, he's throwing these interceptions. What am I doing to put him in these situations? Like, what do I need to change? And that's been a mentality that we've seen for a lot of different players within this offense, not just Bo Nix. Like for example, would be Marvin Mims. Completely struggled up to the trade deadline. Everybody's wondering, are the Broncos going to go get a playmaker from Bo Nix? Nobody's making plays. Marvin Mims kind of looking like a bust. From the trade deadline on, the Broncos figured out, okay, we can put this guy in the backfield. We can give him the ball different ways. We can get him the ball in space. We can utilize him in different ways. They figured out a way to unlock him. Similar things have happened with Bo Nix over the course of the season. You figure out this definitely isn't going to work. So what do we need to do to put him in better situations? And I think that's just kind of been the ebb and flow of his rookie season that you've seen tangibly on the field each week.
Yeah, and I think you have to be pretty ecstatic with what the results have been so far, being in a for sure playoff team at this point with a rookie quarterback and a team that really struggled last year. But looking at that defense has been really high. Obviously, Jameis Winston, they got the best of both worlds, right? Threw for 500 yards, like 700 between the two teams, but they were still able to make enough plays and get 2 pick sixes and almost another one. And in the last game, totally kind of put the team on their back for a big stretch of that game where they put that thing to bed. What is the biggest story for the defense this week?
Well, the biggest story for the defense in week 16 for the Denver Broncos is going to be, can Nick Bonitto continue to make massive differences in the games? Like, is he going to be able to even maybe take over defensive player of the year voting right now? Or I guess they don't vote till the end of the season, but the odds right now favor TJ Watt, obviously. And then right behind him is Pat Surtain and Nick Bonitto. So I think another big play from Bonitto, like we've seen the last 2 weeks, which I'm just calling them both pick sixes. I know they're calling the one last week a fumble recovered for a touchdown.
It's a pick six to me.
It's a pick six to me too. And so I'm saying, hey, what can he do this week? What kind of difference can he make in the game this week? He's the guy that I think is going to be keyed in on every single play. But what's really helping him be so successful is those guys next to him. I mean, Malcolm Roach playing really well as a first-year player for the Broncos here, coming over from the Saints. John Franklin Myers, Zach Allen, DJ Jones, all these guys on the defensive front are giving him favorable matchups throughout the course of the game because they're winning their one-on-ones as well. So what is Bonitto going to do this week to hopefully continue to make his case for defensive player of the year?
Yeah, and I think, as far as Nick Bonitto goes, like, how could you not key in on him? And I think the problem for the Chargers is when you have the interior offensive line struggles that they've had, how can you attribute extra attention to him, right? And I think for the Chargers, your tackles are the least of your worries to a certain extent. Like, Nick Bonitto is going to get his, but you like your chances with Rashawn Slater. You like your chances with Joe Alt, who's been phenomenal as a rookie. The problem is I think those are the 40% of the offensive line you feel good about at all. You have your starting left guard in this game questionable with Zion Johnson going into the game now that we have the game statuses. He is questionable. You might have to put in Jamari Sawyer, who has been okay this year, but was one of the worst guards in the NFL last year. So it's just not a lot to feel good about on that interior. If the Chargers can't answer the questions in this game of, hey, where's the blitz coming from? Can we protect it? Can we communicate well enough to not get Justin Herbert absolutely killed in this game? It's going to be a really, really long game for their offense. Like, they have to develop a short passing game. They have to be able to get rid of the ball quick. They have to be able to identify things very quickly. Because if not, we saw in the last game, in that second half, the Chargers put up a goose egg, right? In the second half against the Falcons, put up a goose egg. In the first half against the Falcons, a goose egg. This is not a defense that's going to make it easy for them. So that is what it's going to be. And unfortunately for the Chargers, with no running game to speak of, with the protection issues that they have, feels like this is a game that it's going to have to be Justin Herbert putting this team on his back once again. And then we do have to get into the biggest stories on the Chargers side of things on this crossover Thursday coming up, and more on this crossover Thursday. It is that time of the year, though. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then, the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. I also need to tell you guys about Hillsdale College because history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, it's probably time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed the basic fundamental truths about our world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and the history of the Constitution, introduction to free market economics, the great American story, A Land of Hope, and so much more. And the great thing is all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever, tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper if you want to with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Time to get into the Chargers side of things here, Sayre, because Chargers are kind of a weird team to figure out. If you want to look at their schedule and say, hey, they haven't beat any good teams, the one argument you can make is they beat the Broncos, right? I mean, that is the plus 500 team that they've been able to beat so far this year. But it does feel like this matchup is different. And going into this one, maybe the personnel is a little bit different. Maybe the injuries are a little bit different. But one thing that they're really, really missing is a J.K. Dobbins and their running game. And with the protection and potentially even missing their best offensive linemen who haven't played great, who are going to get replaced by someone they think is worse than who they put out there before. The biggest story for me for this Chargers offense, unfortunately, is can Justin Herbert carry this group enough against a really good defense? I mean, the Chargers have had their struggles, especially when Justin Herbert's been banged up. When you look at these games that they've been getting shutting out in halves, a lot of it is in the first half, he's taking hits and it's affecting him and he's not able to move around as well as he can. He's not able to get out of the pocket and create and get the rushing yards that they're not getting from their running backs. And I think it's just really hard to imagine the Chargers winning this game without him having a big game. I mean, the Broncos are tied with the Chargers in points allowed per game. They also lead the NFL in sacks per game. They don't have a running game that can support him. Can he overcome the offensive line that has really struggled? Unfortunately, the whole part of this regime that we were excited about, and even what Greg Roman said in his opening press conference, can you imagine Justin Herbert if he has a good run game with him? We're still trying to imagine it because we haven't seen it, and we definitely haven't seen it consistently. And since J.K. Dobbins went out, that problem has only gotten larger and larger. I mean, they have really nothing around him. Other guys are going to step up, and they're going to have to, but at the end of the day, it's can Justin Herbert carry this offense, because it feels like he has to going into this one.
Well, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Broncos defense responds after. I mean, the Indianapolis Colts played pretty darn good for a little more than 2 quarters in this last game. I mean, they should have gone up 20-7 based on the way that they were playing. And obviously Jonathan Taylor made just a hilariously bad mistake there, but the Broncos have been having to adjust without Riley Moss the last handful of weeks. And he's not playing tonight either. It's going to be a combination of Chris Abrams-Drain, the rookie 5th rounder out of Missouri, and then Damari Mathis, a former 4th rounder guy who previously at one point in time got his first NFL start against these Los Angeles Chargers as well. So how does Justin Herbert and Greg Roman come together and say, hey, how can we try to take advantage of this secondary? We probably not going to be picking too much on Pat Surtain in this game, although in the previous matchup, they kind of went right at him and he got knocked out of the game right away. And so, I mean, I agree with you. I think this is a game where Justin Herbert going to have to put the Chargers on his back a little bit here. Everybody's dinged up this time of year, things like that. But man, it feels like that's just been a consistent nick for him. Is like, is that the offensive line entirely? Is it just over time he's taking too many shots, whatever it may be? I can tell you this from the perspective of Broncos fans, everybody believes that he's capable of doing that, right? And capable of taking a game and just saying, hey, I'm not going to be the one to make the mistakes out here. I'm going to take advantage of your mistakes like they did in the last matchup.
Well, and that's like the one kind of golden egg that you have if you're a Chargers fan. You're looking for optimism, especially offensively going into this game, is just Well, at least you don't think Justin Herbert's going to throw 2 pick sixes. You don't think that the Chargers are going to turn it over 5 times in this game like we saw the Colts do last week, which if you can actually, not help that offense out, it should be a closer game than we've seen, because that's the crazy thing is with Bo Nix throwing 5 picks the last couple of weeks, they still won both games by double digits, right? That's a really crazy thing, but it does feel like it's going to be up to Justin Herbert to elevate the surrounding and supporting cast around him. And I think a lot of what you think he needs to do in this game depends on how you think the Chargers defense is going to perform. And I think the biggest story for the Chargers defense is just, can they bounce back? Because I think the book on them has been so far this year, if you're a bad offense, they're going to do well against you. If you don't have your quarterback situation figured out, they're going to do well against you. The problem is the good offenses, each one that they played, has been able to put up, a season high that the Chargers defense has allowed, whether it's the Bengals, whether it's the Ravens, or last week giving up a season high 40 points, 10 more points than they'd given up in any game this season. Just in the second half, they gave up 27. They'd only given up 27 twice in a game going into that. And now you have the Broncos, who have scored 29 plus in 4 straight games. And I think what it's going to end up coming down to, if you have to simplify it, I think it's just, can this Chargers defensive pass rush be able to get home on Bo Nix and at least affect him a little bit? Because what happened last week, Chargers ran into a good offensive line and they got buzzsawed. 6 pressures for the entire game. And now you're going up against a team that in 5 of their last 7 has given up 4 pressures or less, which is just insane. The last time they gave up 10 was when they played the Chargers. The difference being this week they have Mike McGlinchey. This week they have Luke Wattenberg, and they didn't have either of those guys in that first matchup. And what we also saw last week is when the pass rush can't get home, maybe that secondary isn't as great as you think it might be, because they got exposed a little bit too. So this is a huge bounce back game if Charger fans are going to have faith in this defense going forward over the last 2 weeks of the season against bad teams and also going into the playoffs potentially. This is a game where they could gain a lot of that faith back.
Absolutely. And the question from the Broncos side of that point that you just made is, okay, is Bo Nix going to be willing to kind of take off and run a little bit more? Because we haven't seen that very much over the last month plus. When he is getting pressured, him just taking off and running. We did finally see a little bit of that against the Colts last week, but it's been few and far between the times he's taken off, and he looks honestly like the best runner on the team right now. So talk about the Chargers.
I know what that feels like.
You know what it's like, right? And so that may be the one thing in this game is like, who can gain an edge in the running game, because the Broncos haven't been able to run the ball. I mean, one of Bo Nix's interceptions against the Colts was a ball thrown on 3rd and 1, and he's trying to throw down the deep right side of the field. You just don't feel confident that you can pick it up. So that's where it's at right there. And that makes the pass protection numbers that you just mentioned even more staggering, because the Broncos aren't running the ball very well at all. And now one of the guys who's been their most efficient back this year, Jaleel McLaughlin, he's not playing in tonight's game with a quad injury. So could we see the Chargers have to go up against Audric Estime, the rookie running back that at this point, very mysterious, because he's only got 17 carries the last 4 games total. Yeah. So very surprising, the Broncos' usage of him and helping Bo Nix. You talked about, Sean Payton, the relationship with Bo Nix. Trust the guy, 5th in the NFL in pass attempts. Could you, like with Justin Herbert on the other side, can you get this guy a dang running game to help him out?
And that honestly might be what decides this game, right? Like, can you get something? Like, I don't even think either of us is asking for a 150-yard rushing performance, right? Can you give him 80 yards at 4.0 yards per carry? Like, I think both of us would, if you gave us that option right now, we'd probably both sign up for it, right? And just know that it's, hey, you're getting some sort of efficient attack, because what happens with that, and both of us have seen it, is you get behind the sticks and it makes life so much tougher. Like, you don't want to be running into 2nd and 8s on every second down, but I do think for the Chargers defense, this is a huge test for Jesse Minter, a guy that has confused quarterbacks, a guy that held this same quarterback in that first half last time these two teams matched up to like 10 yards in the first half. Like, can you do it? Can you scheme it up on a short week? Can you get the Broncos offense out of rhythm? Can you force those takeaways on this offense? Because honestly, like, with where the defense is at this point and the amount that they gave up last week and kind of the sieve that it's been, it feels like this defense needs the turnovers to be that competitive. It needs the turnovers to help this offense out that's going up against a really good defense. Because if they can't, it might be a long game for the Chargers. But we're going to tell you exactly what each of these teams need to do because it is a crossover Thursday. So we're going to get into what 3 things each of us thinks each team has to do. Locked on Chargers, Locked on Broncos, crossover Thursday. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Even with the loss last week to the Buccaneers, even with the Broncos winning 4 in a row, the Chargers are still 2.5-point favorites going into this game. I'm a little bit surprised. Anyone who watched yesterday, I did pick the Chargers to lose this game. 2.5 points, it does feel like it's a toss-up. I do expect it to be a close game, but if you don't want to bet on the spread, that's great because they also have so many other great things you can bet on, like anytime touchdown scores. Quentin Johnston, you can get at plus 250 in this game. He's scored in back-to-back games. On the Broncos side of things, you could go with Cortland Sutton, plus 150 to get into the end zone, and he scored a touchdown in this matchup when these two teams faced off in Week 6. And there's so many more ways to bet. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back here on this crossover Thursday, Locked on Chargers, Locked on Broncos. Thank you to all of the Locked on Chargers and Broncos listeners for making us your first listen today. If you guys need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked on NFL, where they have 2 shows a day now. One of the hottest take artists in the network for sure, Tyler the Madman rolling. And you could also kick back with my guy Tony Wiggins, who's one of the best for sure, as they bring on people who cover their teams every single day, which is always what makes it great on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. But it is time to get into the 3 most important things that each team must do to win this game on a Prize Picks Thursday, because it is crossover Thursday presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. What are the 3 things, Sayre? We've gone over the biggest stories. What do the Broncos have to do to win this game?
Well, I think all 3 of the keys for victory for the Denver Broncos in this game revolve around rookies. Number 1, Bo Nix. He's got to cut down the turnovers. Number 2, you got to find a way to feed Audric Estime. And number 3, when the Broncos offense has been at its best this season, it feels like they're getting Devon Vele and Troy Franklin, 2 rookie wide receivers, involved. So a little 2 for 1 there on point number 3. And I think that's been really an issue these last couple of weeks. They have not been able to get Devon Vele going, which has been odd because there was a 2-game stretch there where he had 17 targets, was catching everything coming his way. Just a really promising stretch of games for him, as well as Troy Franklin making plays after the catch. The Broncos kind of featuring him a little bit more, and it felt like they had things kind of rolling in the passing game with those guys. This last stretch of games has just been odd from that perspective. Usage of the playmakers in the offense, it's been a little bit feast or famine with Cortland Sutton. So can you get those rookies all involved, and can Bo Nix limit the turnovers? I think if all 3 of those things happen, if Bo limits the turnovers, if Estime gets going in this game, because Javonte Williams, I don't know if anyone expects really anything out of him right now. He's been really rough the last handful of month and a half. And those rookie receivers, if they can get going, man, that's those 3 things offensively. I know it's been all defense, pick sixes, all those sorts of things the last couple of weeks, but the Broncos offense being as inefficient as it has, and you mentioned winning by double digits anyway, if that offense can get back on track, man, that'll give you hope not only for this game, but going forward.
Well, and the Chargers definitely knows Chargers fans at least know what it feels like to be relying on rookies, because the Chargers have gotten major contributions. And one of the bigger stories going into this game is the Chargers will be without Cam Hart, who's a rookie cornerback, a 5th-round pick who has been awesome so far this year. They will still have Tarheeb Still, and it does feel like a Tarheeb Still kind of game where it's like, hey, if I'm Bo Nix and I have 5 picks in the last couple games, probably not looking in Tarheeb Still's direction too often. The dude has 4 picks. He's already taken one back to the house. And I hope that he can get another one. But also Joe Alt, Ladd McConkey, where would this offense be without those guys? And Audric Estime is interesting because the Chargers at times this year have struggled with physicality. Not necessarily, what Jim Harbaugh teams are known for. That's a big punishing back. He was a guy I looked at as far as, Chargers potentially taking a running back in this last draft class. That is a dude who can be a bruiser and can test your physicality. So if he gets going, that's bad news for the Chargers. And I mean, the Chargers, I think the one thing you have to hope is that they won't be a sieve in their run defense, right? And that the run defense there and the lack thereof last week, over 200 yards rushing, over 200 yards allowed against the Ravens as well. Chargers run defense has to be much better. And for the Chargers, these are the three things for me. Win the battle of the big play. Stay ahead of the sticks. Keep the Broncos behind the sticks. And for God's sakes, play a complete game. Play 2 halves of football. Football games have 2 halves in them. I need the Chargers to play for both of the halves. Not just one where they're winning and then lose and get blown out in the second half. I need both of them. But the battle of the big play comes down to this to me. The Chargers have just given up way too many big plays recently in the last game. 2 50-plus yard plays. 8 plays of 18-plus yards. I know 18-plus seems kind of random, but we're talking about a league where you start at the 30 on a touchback. You give up 8 plays of 18 yards. Every one of those is almost getting you into enemy territory. So just way too many big chunks allowed. And a team in the Broncos who has a Marvin Mims, who can take it, 90 yards? I mean, 99 yards to the house if he has to. I mean, a guy that with huge big playability. And I honestly just think this Chargers offense, with the struggles that they have, I don't know if they can methodically make their way downfield. Like, I think they need some chunk plays. And we're talking about a running game that in the last 2 games hasn't had a single rush over 10-plus yards from their running backs. Absolutely no volatility there. There's no explosiveness in that part of the Chargers game. And last week, they only had 2 18-yard gains. So they're giving up way too many big plays, and they're not getting enough of themselves offensively from themselves. Staying ahead of the sticks, this Chargers offense has their work cut out for them. If they're sitting in 3rd and long for this entire game, they're going to lose. Straight up. And that's why staying ahead of the sticks is one of the things they must do to win this game. And if you're the Chargers, make Bo Nix face as many 3rd and longs as he possibly can. It's really hard to get pressure on him. The Chargers pass rush needs to step up, but they're not going to be able to do it. And 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, where there are at least options. We know, hey, the Broncos might not want to run it on 3rd and short because they've struggled in that. But the Chargers have to put them in as many of those as they possibly can, because last week they had 6 pressures. It's not going to do it. And then play a complete game. 3 straight games here of not scoring offensively in a half. Whether it's the first half or the second half. Didn't score in the first half against the Chiefs. Didn't score in the second half last week against the Bucs. Didn't score in the second half against the Falcons. If the Chargers don't score in one of the halves in this game, they're going to lose. Straight up. Like, that's just what it is. And I think for the Chargers defense, it's just, can you stop this? They didn't force a punt last week. Can you force a punt? You know what? I'm adding a 4th key to winning. If the Chargers don't force a punt in this game, they're going to lose. So force a punt is my 4th key to this one. But you just have to play a complete game. There's so much that goes into it. And part of it is just keeping Justin Herbert healthy enough to be able to look like close to himself, 80-90% of himself through a whole game. Because if you go back and look at the Chiefs game, if you look at the Steelers and the Bucs games, he's getting beat up in the first half, and he looks kind of like a shell of himself in the second half. So that's for me what it is. Stay ahead of the sticks, play a complete game, and win the battle of the big play, because I think that might be what decides it.
And you talk about getting pressure on Herbert and getting hits on him. I mean, the Broncos do have the highest pass rush win rate in the NFL this year, and that is always a concern to see, like, with Justin Herbert out there. I mean, the last thing anybody, when it comes to NFL fans, wants is to see him knocked out at this point in the season, because I mean, obviously you want your best players out there. And so the Chargers are going to have to figure out ways to, I mean, what we see with the Broncos a lot of times is we'll see Matt Parrott come into the game and be an extra offensive lineman. You see Nate Adkins and Adam Troutman stay into pass block. And then everybody gets ticked off, like, why is nobody open downfield? And it's like, oh, there's only 2 guys running routes. So that's everybody else is pass protecting. Yeah. So there's a lot of frustration with that. But at the same time, your quarterback is dealing with stuff. You might just need to play ball control in a game like this and try to say, hey, Broncos offense has struggled a lot over the last couple of weeks. Let's try to pin them as deep as we possibly can and say, all right, if you can win by going a long field and getting 6 points, we'll be willing to kind of put the ball in your hands that way, but we're not going to give you these short fields. That's where the Broncos have benefited is, okay, defensive touchdowns, short fields. You're helping the rookie quarterback. And Bo Nix had 3 touchdowns last week. Nobody's talking about it. Why? Because every drive started from about the 30 or 40 yard and in. And that's something that the Broncos, we thought last year during their big stretch of wins that they had with Russell Wilson, like, defense can't keep this up. There's no way. They're turning the ball over at such an astronomical rate, and they did it for like 6 straight games. Can they do that in this game? Can you force the Chargers to make mistakes and force them to make early enough to give your offense give your defense, a bit of a cushion early in this game? That's going to be a huge key.
Absolutely, it is. And I think for the Chargers, they just don't like. They've been really good at not giving the ball away. Last week they had 2 turnovers, but I think they're one of the least turnover teams in the league. I mean, Justin Herbert only has 2 interceptions all season, but they can't afford them. Like the margin for error isn't that big for them where they can afford shooting themselves in the offensively with the flaws that they already have there. And for this team, you're just hoping the Chargers, I mean, even in a great playoff standing right now, can get Justin Herbert there, right? Can get him across the finish line and let him finish this season out without having him miss any more time. I mean, he still hasn't missed a game this year. He's only missed the second half against the Steelers late in that game when he got beat up. It's a miracle because the dude's rolled each ankle. Like, he's getting battered. He got hit 13 times last week. It's just unsustainable. I mean, the Chargers have to protect him. And I think the thing is, and why it's part of this part, if they give him protection, he can shred anyone. He can shred anyone with anyone. And I think that's the most frustrating part is like he can elevate these guys, but you need kind of a perfect storm of things to come together offensively to feel really good, especially going up against this defense who, like you said, didn't have Patrick Surtain the last time. They had him for like one play. He got hurt, and you got to go up against that defense, a really good defense without easily their best player and one of the 2 defensive player of the year candidates the Broncos have. But Chargers can get these things done. I still absolutely believe they can get a win. If the Broncos can do that, they're going to have a great chance to win as well. But I'm really excited to watch this matchup. Thursday Night Football in prime time. Thank God the Jets are as bad as they are, so we at least get, put a spotlight on what should be a much better game than whatever the Jets are playing in this week. But thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen and for checking out Crossover Thursday. To make sure you never miss the shows, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers and Locked On Broncos YouTube channels and listen wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find each of us who also post our shows to our accounts. You can find me on X or Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and Sayre Bedinger at Sayre Bedinger on Twitter, which is awesome that you can just have your name as your handle. I don't see that very often, but should be a heck of a fun game, Sayre. I'm really excited to watch it. Make sure you guys are checking out the post-game shows for this game because it should be electric. But until then, guys, take it easy. We appreciate you guys. And, of course, we will talk to you soon.